Hey there, this is the PTSD Chaplain. I'm the Director of MASH, Mobile Assistance for Servicemen and Women at Home. I have here today with us Dr. Brian Barber. He is a medical doctor at the VA. He also is a veteran. He spent some time in the Navy as well as in the Air Force, is where he ended his time in the military as a medical doctor. Dr. Barber, could you tell us a little bit of your time in the Navy or Air Force?
I spent 6 years on active duty from 1986 to 1992. Joined right out of high school. And I realized very quickly that Navy stood for Never Again Volunteer Yourself. That kind of struck me as something that I needed to do is basically get out. So I did. After my 6 years under the nuclear power program, I was a machinist mate. I was crazy enough to actually then switch over to the hospital corps for a little bit of time in the reserve there in South Bend. I was at the reserve unit in the hospital corps. And then after I got out of the Navy, I went straight to Bob Jones University. I had about 17 days in between when I was discharged from the military and when I had to start school. I went to Rochester, Minnesota for residency, and Des Moines, Iowa is where the affiliate program was, and I commissioned in the Air Force under the Health Professions Scholarship Stipend Program. They basically paid me while I was in residency training so that I could, get a rank and get some pay until I was actually able to affiliate and drill. And then I affiliated when I got out of my training. I went back to Indiana and worked there at Grissom Air Force Base, where I did 2 tours for OEF, and then I finally got out 2013, and now I've got about 8 years to go at the VA.
So also, I remember you were telling me a little bit about when you were in the Navy, that one of your ships caught on fire. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, we were underway off the coast of Camp Lejeune. I believe it was May of 1990. I was on what's affectionately known as a tin can. I was on a guided missile destroyer. It was called a DDG-17. It was ancient. It was called an Adams class, which, if you know anything about, military destroyers, that's about as old as you can get and still be running, right? So we were on this old Adams class destroyer in the coast of Camp Lejeune off of North Carolina, and we're supposed to be getting ready for this inspection, right? We called it OPI, Operational Propulsion Engineering. Basically, the big shots are going to come on and they're going to see how well we manage catastrophes and running our power plants and contingencies and all those kind of things, so we can get graded and see if we are so-called battle ready. So I had a collateral duty of being on the at-sea fire party. It was known as the Flying Squad. That's kind of what they called them. And I remember I went to my bunk. It was, 5 o'clock in the morning when I heard this general quarters, and they turned on the siren, and you hear this, I mean, that's the sound that you hear in general quarters, right? And so I got up, I went up to where we were supposed to meet, and right there where you go up the stairs from the bunk room, it's just completely blacked out. I mean, it's just black smoke everywhere. So all of a sudden, I turn to my right as you're looking from the aft part of the ship forward, and here comes my XO, and all he's doing is shaking and screaming. I couldn't really see how bad he was hurt, but I could tell obviously something's wrong, because when your XO comes running at you screaming, that's usually not normal, right? So here he comes. He's coming through this black smoke. I can't really see anything but a figure, and he's yelling at me and everybody else that's around him. And then we find out that, sure enough, he had singed his hair Fortunately, didn't really burn a lot of his face, but the guy was clearly shook up because it was basically a fireball that came right through the ventilation duct and out the starboard side of the ship and hit him as he's running towards the back. And we figure out that we're going to have to do something because there's really no way you can see what's going on up there. The fire was in the forward part of the ship, and we knew it was in the forward part of the ship because as it was burning through the deck, right under where the bridge was, there was a fire main, and that was one of the main water sources, and it burned through and it burst that pipe. So we lost all front fire main water going to the ship. So we had no way to hook up the fire hoses, right? So we went and we grabbed what's called a P50 pump, and these P50 pumps actually had a nozzle with a filter you could throw over the side and pump seawater into it. So we did that. So we're pumping seawater into a 4-inch fire hose, trying to basically just spray our way up to whatever we can see. And eventually we made it up to the front of the ship, and we were able to get people down into that boiler room, which was what was caught on fire, the boiler room, and put it out. So that was a pretty interesting time.
It sounds like it.
But I do remember that the next thing I know, we're back in port at Norfolk in Virginia, and the ship was decommissioned later because there was no fixing.
And what was the name of that ship? I know you were talking about there was a...
It was called USS Cunningham. It was a DDG-17 Adams class, 5 million years old. You know, at least it seemed that way.
Yes, and for those that are watching, you can actually go online and Google or Bing or whatever search engine you have, look that up, and it's a YouTube video that you can see, and they'll take a tour of what that ship looks like now, which is basically in a graveyard. So.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure what it looks like now because last I heard, they had either sold it to Gillette or they put it out into Guantanamo Bay and used it for fire practice. I believe what they did was they shot holes into it and sunk it. So that's what they did. They took it out. And the interesting thing is, before we sold that, or before we took that thing and put it out there for target practice, we had to decommission it, which means we had a decommission ceremony. Yes, we had to repaint everything. So here we are repainting this ship, right, that's going to be used for a target. It was interesting. But anyway, yeah, I do remember that part.